Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Aquarian Radio Network. And my name is Janet Carolison. I'm your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Dave Emmons. And we're going to be interviewing Bruce Cornett. And we are all contactees, experiencers, and this is the Alien Contact Organization on Aquarian Radio. And so I'm not going to read a long bio. I have everything up on aquarianradio.com for today's show, and I will be adding some additional information of the technical difficulties. But these shows go really fast, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to pull on I don't know which one. I'm going to bring everybody live because I didn't get the phone numbers marked on the panel here. So I'm going to introduce you, or let Dave Emmons, my co-host, introduce himself, and then my guest will come on. We're going to focus on interviewing Bruce for the first 20 minutes to half an hour, and then we're going to go round robin and ask each other questions and talk about the issues that are relevant right at this time. And I clicked on the buttons, and they're going round and round and round. Okay, Dave.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, this is Dave Emmons.
Okay. Hi, Dave. Tell everybody about yourself, who you are, and a little bit about your background.
Okay, I was in top secret with nuclear weapons in the military back in 69, and 68, 69, and I got out of that because I didn't like the intense scrutiny that the military intelligence would be paying us about every week, and I was going to go into Sandia, probably underground, so I didn't want that. So I got off into something else, and then that led me to going to Vietnam. I was a platoon sergeant there, and then I was offered a commission, and then I took off. I didn't want no more of the military. I didn't want no more of Vietnam, really. But then I got into music. I played music 45 years, got into small business management. I worked as a supervisor in an oil refinery, and I worked with AmeriCorps and with the Red Cross in disaster management. And I guess you could say mostly I was in the small business and owned my own business background and journalistic background in college, and I went to school for journalism. So that's typically my background, but I've been an experiencer ever since I was the age of 14. So I've had quite a few experiences in between 2009 and 2012. But today we have Dr. Bruce Cornett, and he has had a lot of experiences, a lot of documentation. Janet, you'll once you see his documentation, you'll know that's very impressive. And some of the stories we've talked in the past. We've gotten to know each other through text and through email and also the phone. We don't personally know each other, I guess not meeting in person, but got to know him, that he's a very, I guess a very intelligent person, and he's got academia and experience both together, and that's a good combination. So I'm really interested in hearing some of the stories that he has for us. Not stories. I don't like saying stories. I like saying events or experiences. And so whenever you're ready, Janet, you can start with Bruce.
Okay, so we will just bring on Bruce. And Bruce, tell our audience about yourself, and we're going to listen to you for about, 10 to 15 minutes. But sometimes we may want to interject something, so bear with us. We're going to let you tell yours, and it's not a story. This is, we're talking about ET and paranormal experiences, and some of them are pretty detailed. We're going to be putting all the evidence up on aquarianradio.com, so you, the listener, can go and look at this information. We're going to be archiving this and spreading this out to about a dozen platforms, including YouTube. So take it away, Dr. Bruce Cornett.
Yes.
And tell us about yourself.
Okay, Janet and Dave. I'll say that I got started in all of this back in 1992 when I was approximately 46 years old. Up until that point, I had been on a path through academia with 3 different degrees. I had been to Fairleigh Dickinson University, University of Connecticut, and Penn State University, where I got my doctorate in geology and palynology. And then I went in 1977. I moved from the Northeast to Houston, Texas, and started working with Gulf Research and Development in the oil industry. And I spent 11 years in the oil industry, working for various companies until the bottom fell out of the oil market. And then I was able to get a job as a research associate at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in Palisades, New York. So my family and I moved all the way back to the Northeast, and we set up our house in our condo in Middletown, New York, and I had about an hour's drive to Lamont Doherty, which was a Earth Observatory, which was a part of Columbia University. And I didn't realize at the time that I was living right next to a UFO hotspot. And I didn't discover that until 1992, after my wife had died. And so I was living alone in Middletown, New York, and I saw a miniseries on television called Intruders, and I was rather shocked as being a scientist that this type of material about alien abductions was on primetime television. I'd never seen a show like that before. And in the halls of academia, we rarely ever talked about the subject. So I went to the bookstore to get a copy of the book Intruders by Bud Hopkins and Dr. John Mack, and the book manager suggested I also buy a book by Ellen Crystal called Silent Invasion. And I was rather shocked to find out that after reading her book that I was living in next to an area of many sightings, and I was able to contact Ellen Crystal, and she said she went on regular sky watching trips to the Pine Bush area of New York in the Wallkill River Valley and invited me to join her. Well, it was on that first night out back in, I think it was the 9th of June, 1992, that I saw things that I just could not explain. We had lights and ships flying around us and over us and diving into the ground and coming up out of the ground. And we just, it was totally foreign to me. I said, what kind of world am I living in? Why isn't anybody reported on this? This is major news. And so I started a whole campaign of going out on a semi-regular basis after work to sky watch at night and photograph the lights in the sky with Ellen Crystal and her friends. That we would all meet and go out there, because I only lived maybe 5 to 10 miles from all of this activity, and it was very convenient for me to get there and to see this stuff. Well, I decided that I wanted to document this scientifically, which is what I started doing, and I used time exposures with a camera mounted on a tripod, operated by an electronic shutter switch, and was recording with an audio recorder all of the time exposures that I took of these lights that were flying around us. And I'm talking about lights that were not as high as conventional aircraft, which would fly over us, but stuff that was lower in altitude than 1,000 feet, maybe only 500 feet above the ground. And in a rural area with lots of farmlands and dairy farms and forests, this was highly anomalous. and I felt that I was making extremely good progress of documenting that these were not conventional aircraft. So I conducted an 11-year study of this area. During that 11 years, I got married again, moved to Red Bank, New Jersey, which was about an hour and a half drive from my research area near Wallkill and Walden and Pine Bush, New York, and made many friends in the process. And we would go out into the field together. And I recorded hundreds of these craft. They would come out and put on performances, just as they did with Ellen Crystal, that she describes in her book, Silent Invasion. And so that is the resulted in my finally finishing a book on all of this research called Unconventional Aerial Phenomena in the Hudson and Wallkill River Valley of New York. It's currently in press and should be coming out on Amazon in maybe a week or so.
Dr.
So congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Dr. Bruce, I want to ask you, did you get enough close look at some of these craft? Could you tell what their designs were, or what they?
Yes. Most of them, Dave. Sure. Keep in mind that most of these craft came out at night, and very rarely did anybody ever see them during the day. And I quickly realized that if they had been flying around in the day, at the low speeds that they flew, people would, many more people would see them. And if they turned out their plasma lights, you couldn't see them at all. They didn't make any sounds when they moved around. But when they tried to put on performances, or did put on performances for skywatchers, especially for me and my camera, they would attempt to mimic conventional aircraft. But even though we would see lights coming up from distant farm fields, they would rise up above a tree line and continue to ascend until they arced over us. And then once they got past us, they would dive down below the tree line again behind us. And this was highly anomalous. Conventional aircraft don't do that. And when they were over us, what we would see would be a triangular-shaped craft or a diamond-shaped craft. No circular or spherical craft did we see. And they would exhibit lighting on them that resembled the navigation lights of conventional aircraft. We could even see booms sticking out in front of the triangles and in the back, where there were lights attached to those booms to simulate the lights on the forward part of a conventional aircraft fuselage. A DC-9, for example, which frequents Stewart Airport nearby on the other side of the valley, would have wingtip navigation lights. They would have the headlights would be mounted along the fuselage or at the wings, where the wings join the fuselage. And then at the nose of the craft, you would have more lights. And at the tail, you would have a tail light, and you'd even have lights that illuminated the engines in the back, so that the people inside could see the engines if there was a problem with the engines. And these triangular craft, would attempt to mimic all of those lights. And they would even produce a sound that sounded like that of a jet. And on many occasions, these craft would lift off. We'd see them coming up from a farm field about a half a mile away and rise up above the trees and come over us, and they would be silent. And we would all be speculating as to what was this. We wouldn't hear a sound until these craft were within maybe 500 feet from us. Then we'd hear a sound, and it was a sound like that of a jet. And when it flew over us, it sounded like that of a jet engine. And everybody standing in the crowd would just say, "Oh yeah, it's just a jet." That's all it was. And what we didn't realize is that they were using us as quality control on their camouflage techniques. And when I recorded the sounds and when I played them back through a frequency spectral analyzer, lo and behold, I found out that the sounds were synthetic and were very different from that of the sounds made by a turbofan jet engine. We had no white noise, which all jet engines produce white noise in the higher frequencies, and the frequencies of these craft would be divided up into 10 to 12 different parallel frequencies that all descended in frequency as the craft approached us, and then the frequencies all ascend or become higher in frequency as the craft moved away. This we quickly realized was exact opposite of normal Doppler, and we coined the term reverse Doppler. So it became a characteristic of these craft. If they produce sound, the sounds they produce would not be that of a conventional jet. And of course, we quickly realized that the lights were not lamps. These were not bulbs attached to a fuselage. These were high energy plasmas that literally interacted with the atmosphere and set the atmosphere on fire. And so a lot of things were very different from that of conventional aircraft, but they were attempting to essentially camouflage themselves as for the local populace, because we were living in an area which was highly populated outside of the farm fields and dairy farms, and we had the Stewart Air Force and military base 9 miles away near Newburgh and the Hudson River, and commercial aircraft and military aircraft would be coming in and out of that airport all the time. So we would have them coming near us, flying near us in the field, and we could see very clearly that these were conventional aircraft. But the UAP, as I call them, unidentified aerial phenomena, they would attempt to mimic the conventional aircraft so as to remain low observable. And
Dr.
not,
Bruce.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a couple things I want to interject here. So at one time I had John Titer II on, and he had flown in the TR-3B and the, I think he called it was the TR-11. And what he said as a super soldier, right, space program super soldier, he said that that was the one of the triangular vehicles was a very large one. I have it on Aquarian Radio under John Titer II. And he said that was like a interstellar craft that was reverse engineered from alien technology. And then the TR-3B is a smaller triangular craft. Do you think that these craft that you were seeing were reverse engineered? They were our craft belonging to our secret military?
Well, remember, I kept this investigation going for 11 years. And a lot of activity recorded between 1992 and 1997, when the activity suddenly dropped off. But the problem that I have with the conventional explanation for these craft is that these craft, many of them we witnessed and photographed and videotaped diving into the ground and coming up out of the ground. And I don't know, there were no tunnels or openings that were there. This was all private land, not military land.
Right.
So the question becomes, just how advanced is our technology? Now, on the 17th of May, 1997, Mark Whitford and his girlfriend, Dinah Bertrand, and I met in the field on Muddy Kill Lane, on a ridge on the west side of the valley, and, to typically skywatch. What we didn't realize is that we would have a performance being made by the TR-3B that was authorized by the military for Skunk Works to send their their triangle out and to put on a performance for us. And the first thing that we saw were two triangles that flew over us, and then a little bit later, we saw lights at the end of Buddy Kill Lane, about a mile away, and just hovering. And when we trained our cameras, camcorders, and SLR on them, the craft started to come towards us and put on quite a performance in terms of aerobatics. And as it approached our position, it turned to our right or its left, it banked, and then rolled over and flew away from us across the valley, upside down and backwards. And then in the middle of the valley, it dove down towards the ground, slowing down as it descended, which conventional aircraft cannot do because of gravity, and then disappeared behind the trees on the other in the middle of the valley. So we didn't know what we actually.
You said that was in May of '97.
97, right?
What was the date? What was the date of the fleeting flight? Are we talking about the same? We're talking about the same year, yeah.
The 17th of May, 1997, and I have a whole website on this, on the UK, and showing the video, etc. This is quite a spectacular performance. And then Mark, who is a Navy veteran, was told by a friend of his in the military that this was a TR-3B. So, so we actually have craft that we can compare, the videos that we can compare, to see, what the similarities and differences are. And that really confused the issue, because it was in about that same time, Janet, that the various recording organizations like NUFORC and MUFON and NIDS were all recording black triangles, and they generated a map and graphs that showed in the mid-1990s the number of black triangle sightings started to increase exponentially almost until it reached a peak in the early 2000s, and to the extent that that there are hundreds and hundreds of sightings being made across the country. And one has to ask, what is responsible for this rapid increase over maybe a 10-year period of all of these black triangle sightings? And, of course, Dr. Colm Kelleher. Yeah, Colm Kelleher at NID.
What did he say?
He put he got Bigelow to pay for all of these databases and put them together. And at a conference in Las Vegas in May of 2004, he gave a talk on this, and he said initially when he was starting the study, he was looking for evidence of sightings between military airfields, and he thought he had some data that substantiated this. Then when he was able to pull together all of the thousands of sightings from these different reports across the country, he said there was no way one could explain this, because the majority of sightings were over populated areas, over major highways, major cities, around major places of human habitation.
Yeah, Dr. Bruce. Dr. Bruce, that was some of the questions I wanted to ask you. Did the Air Force Base ever, or did you contact them? Did they have any radar contact with these unidentified aerial phenomena you're talking about?
Yeah, well, remember, it's a military base as well as an international airport. And I went over there and I talked to people worked for the FAA there. I wanted to know, what kind of radar did they have, and they said because they had a big radar unit on top of a hill located in the middle of that military base, right next to the airstrips. And he said, I said, do you routinely survey what's going on the west side of the valley? And he says, we have a program that blocks any returns from that part of the valley. We do not they do not allow us to see what's going on there. The information is recorded, but it is not open to the public.
Yeah, the other
And,
question I had was, when you talked about flying over residential areas, was there a residential area near where you were working or taking these videos?
Well, the hot spot that I determined its location was between 4 towns, local towns. Walden was the closest, and Montgomery was the next closest. Then there was Pine Bush to the north, and then there was Wallkill to the east. So you had 4 major areas of population surrounding the hot spot.
Well, the triangle that I saw, I can compare notes on this one. This one was flying really low, about 70 feet high, and it was over our neighborhood. It flew over a residential area, and I know that Janet was referring to the TR-3 or whatever those the man-made aircraft are back engineered or whatever they are. They probably have them, but the one I saw, and what you're saying too, this one flew real slow, and it was huge. It was about 7 or 8 houses wide, and I looked right up underneath the belly of it. It had 2 big globes at the bottom, glass globes at the front of the craft.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
The craft that I was seeing, were more in the 100 feet on a side of a triangle. Sometimes they were as big as 300 feet on a side. But it was the largest ones that Ellen Crystal and I saw belonged to the manta ray, and the manta ray was diamond shaped, but it could withdraw its tail, and it's shaped like that of a manta ray shark. And when it withdrew its tail, it was a huge triangle, as wide as the wings on a 747. So
yeah.
That was
All right,
pretty big.
I have a picture on my site under John Titer, and they show the scale of the, they call this the Telus, but I think it's called the SR-11, TR-6 telescoping flight, and there's a comparison with it. It's much bigger than a 747. So apparently our secret military, and my understanding that these are reverse engineered with working with extraterrestrials, but they, so it's some of the technology we got from, trading with the extraterrestrials so they can take our people, do abductions and those type of things. But what I've identified is this, tell us, what is it? Let me see that again. The TR-6, the TR-3B. There's a whole series. The one that was the Phoenix Light one, I think it's the TR-11. It was huge, and that's the interstellar craft. So you mentioned the globes. Yeah, I have some artist rendition. They have the, so Dave, you said you looked up and you saw the globes underneath, and they
right,
are able to, of course, 2 of them. Okay, so that looks like this one. Well, maybe they can turn them off and on. It looks like they can have a number of them, but they might just turn on 1 or 2 at a time or something. And they can turn them off and on.
Those are propulsion units, I think, Janet, that they have, yeah. Yeah, the bright lights,
right.
Those are propulsion. And this one flew over residential, and I don't think the military flies experimental craft, especially over residential areas, just like Dr. Bruce was alluding to.
Right, exactly.
Well, see, this
Plus,
was
we
over
also have
Phoenix.
We have
yeah,
the Westchester Boomerang.
So they have been flying them over populated areas because the Phoenix Lights was March 13th, 1997, and so, Bruce, you had your encounter the 17th of May, 1997, and, I don't think that was a mistake. So let's look at that. What is the purpose of them? That's like soft disclosure. We're going to fly this over, and we're going to have, hundreds if not thousands of people see it simultaneously, so there's no doubt that we're seeing something, and then the news is going to get it and ridicule it. But let's look at that. What is the purpose of showing everybody? You said that yours was a display that they put on a show for you, and I've had them put on a show for me too, and it's obvious.
Remember,
so, let me ask that question. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Bruce. Why would they do that? What's the reason?
Remember,
purposely doing that.
This was in the 1990s, Janet. Okay, and in the
right.
1980s, we had the night siege, the Hudson Valley sightings that were over the Hudson River instead of over the Wallkill River Valley, which was to the west of the Hudson River. and people saw these huge ships, some of them rectangular, some of them triangular, that hovered over towns and cities. And I have a description on one of my web pages of somebody who saw one of these coming up over the tree line and passing over a 4-lane highway, and it was as wide as a 4-lane highway, and that's pretty big. Okay.
Right.
And what he saw this gondola on the base of it, near the front of it. It was boomerang shaped, and this gondola had windows in it, and you could see into the windows these orange panel of lights on the back instrument part of it that were clearly mechanical. Okay, and it just glided right over him. And he was just blown away. He saw it coming. He pulled over the side of the road, got out, and looked at it as it passed directly over him. And so there was a crew cabin, and with instruments inside it that he could see underneath at the base of it. So one has to ask, who built this, and where would you hide something this big? I mean, you just can't go park it on any farm field or tarmacs anywhere without somebody seeing it. It is of course the quick answer was, well,
okay,
they don't.
Okay, so let's look at that.
Yeah, they go up out into space and they hide into space. Well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But one also has to wonder if they have a craft that's big, what is the purpose of it? And they would have to build a hangar that would be equally as big.
Can I interject, Dr.
Sure.
Dr. Bruce? I want to ask a couple of questions. One to Janet. Janet, you're saying that these are man-made that flew over the Phoenix area, and that those were the Phoenix Lights. I haven't heard of that.
Says that. Yeah, John Titor. You can listen. Go onto my YouTube and listen to my interview with John Titor II, who was in the Secret Space Program. He said that is an interstellar craft, and they use that to travel outside of our solar system to locate planets that we're able to colonize. His mission was to find, he had 10 that he investigated. He found 2 that were best to start colonizing. This was back in the 70s, and we have colonies now. We're actively locating people there. I guess it's still the human race survived this stuff that's happening here on the Earth, right? So they started thinking about that long ago. So he said that we have colonies throughout the solar system, but this is beyond our solar system. And there's 2 of them, and he named
Dr. Bruce, I want to ask you a question. Since you're into the science part of it, maybe you can explain. These ships were going into the ground. I have a couple of theories on it, but you might have more of a scientific opinion on this. How was they able to fly straight into the ground?
Okay, good question. Ellen Crystal in her book says that out in the field, on several occasions, at least one in particular she describes in detail, she said this opening appeared in the field, and warm air came out of it, and then the opening closed, so that it wasn't a door or an entrance. It was something that created an opening in the rock that would allow a craft to pass through a tunnel into an underground base, and then that opening would close back up. This is something that if we have this technology, forget about rockets. We don't need rockets to go to the different planets. We've already achieved that. So the big mystery is who is doing this, and if this is a non-human group, the big question is how much in bed are they with the military, or how much is the military in bed with them? I mean, how much information have they shared? And so that was the big question in my research is, which is real and which is a copy. You have the real, the ETV, and you have the ARV, the alien reproduction vehicle. And so it is very suspicious that this base that I was studying underground would be so close to so many different military installations or places where the military had set up its operations. And one of the things that I've always wondered about the manta ray is the manta ray has, and also the triangles, they're so-called landing lights, or the brightest lights on these craft, are at the far outer sides of the craft, the lateral sides. In other words, if this was a conventional aircraft, these lights would be out near the wingtips. What are they? Mm-hmm. That's non-functional. Our headlights on aircraft are on the nose of the aircraft, so they can illuminate the runway as the pilot is landing on a runway. But why would you have headlights that are way out on the far sides of this triangular or diamond-shaped craft? And it suddenly dawned on me that if they tunnels would open up and they would pass down through tunnels to their base, they would have to be able to illuminate the sides of the tunnels so they didn't run into it. And one of the times the craft, this manta ray, flew over Barbara Hartwell and I, and we videotaped it. And as it came at us, it sort of looked like a conventional aircraft. We didn't know quite what it was until it got right up on top of us. Then we could see its diamond shape. But when it rotated its outermost lights down as beams that pointed directly down at us as it flew over us. And that was a huge piece of evidence that if these lights can rotate, then they can illuminate the sides, the roof, and the floor of tunnels that they're flying through so they don't run into the tunnels, sides of the tunnel and crash.
Right. I have a question for Janet and Dr. Bruce, for both of you. I guess these craft shape-shift, I imagine. That's what Dr. Bruce was talking about earlier, that they mask and look like our aircraft. And I saw one that was small. It looked like a drone, about 15, 20 feet wide, and it looked like a small glider, except it was all metal, metallic, and it didn't have all the wings on it. It didn't have the two, ailerons or whatever they call them in the back. I'm not aeronautical smart on that one, but that flew over an oil refinery, and that's restricted air, area, and so the government doesn't want you to fly in those zones. So what is it that any of you two have noticed or talked about or know much about the masking of these things that look like airplanes, like you were talking about?
Well, Ellen Crystal, in her book, talks about this.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about the small plane-like ones that she's seen with other people. And they're about the size of a small single-engine private plane, but they would just follow her around. You know, what planes follow people around on the ground and can stop and hover and came within maybe 50 feet of her. So she saw them very clearly, and she describes them in her book. And I've seen them too. I've seen these plane-like UAP that they really do resemble conventional aircraft. And as I said, I've also I've been followed home by a Boeing 707 at one night, and during the sunset, this craft that looked like a conventional jetliner, but it had no engines on its outer surface. It was totally black in color, no windows where the flight deck would be in the front of it, and it produced the sound like that of a jet, and flew right across the highway in front of me at about a couple hundred feet in altitude, and it took about 5 or 6 seconds to cross the highway. And later, when I got home, it had followed me home, and I took pictures of it, and was able to determine its relative speed as anywhere from 25 to 60 miles an hour, and that is well below that of a stall speed of a conventional aircraft. So there's no question in my mind that they were mimicking conventional aircraft. But then, very astutely, somebody I was talking to who worked in the aerospace industry said that if we had developed a anti-gravity engines, propulsion system, one of the first things we would do would be to the military to put it into a conventional airframe and fly that. So, the question is, whose technology is this? We don't know.
Well,
at
that's
this point.
That's what what's his name? I forget his name. He died 2 years ago. Tompkins says that they use conventional whatever, they recycle, so they'll get these submarines and other craft, and they'll put them out in space, and they'll just retrofit them, and so that's like the carriers that go between planets, and they just put different engines in them. I have a friend who's working on a free energy drive system. He reverse engineered it because he was in the secret military, so he had this ability, and he's been working on it. He's doing the patents, but of course he can't get past the patent process because they can, the regular world doesn't want this secret technology getting out yet because they want to keep us locked into fossil fuels. But I've seen a plane, or not a plane, I call it a sport model craft, and it materialized. It kind of twisted. It was like a pretzel untwisting, right? And it unfolded, and it appeared like almost the craft the size of a just a long car, like a not a Rolls Royce, the limousine. It appeared like the size of a limousine. It was right on my deck. My deck's 35 feet long, so it took about 2/3 of the deck, and it hovered 6 feet above my deck and about 10 feet out, right, from where I was sitting. And it just stayed there for 15 minutes. And then I was communicating with it telepathically.
Yeah. Janet, no cockpit, no means of propulsion?
No, it kind of reminded me of the vehicle that they had in Star Wars, where they kind of drifted across the desert, and they stopped at the guard, and the guard said, "Is this your droid?" At least not the droid you're looking. But it was all enclosed. It wasn't open. It was kind of like I call it the sport model, right? And it almost looked like you could drive it down the street, but it twisted into this airspace right above my deck, right in front of my face. It was positioned so I did not have to move my eyes or my head. It was like front and center. So it was definitely telepathic, interacting with me. I was talking to TJ Morris on the phone. I just happened to be sitting here looking over at Haleakala, which is supposedly underneath Haleakala is Haleakala Science City, and there's supposed to be 14 levels down or something of military and secret base. So anyway, we've seen a lot of these, but I'm still back to the question is why were they showing themselves to us? It's like, okay, it's not that they exist or don't exist. Like, you're showing these to us. You're showing this to a large number of people. You're doing it within this time frame. And now, we have a lot of sightings, to this day. That craft I saw was only about 3 years ago. What's going on here? And I know there's pure extraterrestrial craft. I asked the craft. I said, who's driving this ship? He said, it's me. I am the craft. So it was some kind of AI. And he said, I'm conscious. I'm sentient. And then it came 3 times later, but it didn't show itself. Maybe it didn't want to get caught showing itself to me. But it came with the sound. So I had to listen to your sound, but it had a very strange sound. I have to think of how it sounded. I was reproducing it for a while when it just happened. And, it was like, it was warbling like that. Okay, so we'll go back.
Okay.
We'll go round robin here. So,
Janet, I was wanting to change.
Go ahead.
Janet, I was wanting to change the subject for Dr. Bruce.
Sure.
He told me a tantalizing story, I guess the last day or two, and it's like it goes under the topic of aliens amongst us. And I ran into a hybrid myself, and that story turned out to, or that event turned out to be very true as this person come to my house. But Dr. Bruce also has a story about Florida You were mentioning it earlier. I find it fascinating. Could you tell that story, Dr. Bruce?
Are you talking about Florida or are you talking about Amsterdam?
The gal, the short gal in the picture that you have, that
yes, that's Amsterdam.
Okay.
You know, in Europe.
Okay.
Right. This was a long time ago. I was 17 years old. I had graduated from high school, and my French class organized a trip for French students over to France for the summer. This was quite an opportunity, and my parents were willing to pay for that trip. And there were about a couple dozen, actually, you know, more like 28 people in the group that went over to France, and we spent the summer in Cannes on the Riviera, you know, learning how to speak French. And at the end of that trip, we stopped at several places on the way back to the United States. We stopped and spent 3 days in Paris, and then we stopped in Amsterdam and spent 3 days in Amsterdam. And our guide told us that, you know, get up in the morning and go down and decide where, in groups, where you're going to go and tour the city. So I was standing with about 3 or 4 of my other male friends in the lobby of the American Hotel in Amsterdam, and I noticed that there was a short, pretty woman standing off on the side of the lobby, and when I made eye contact with her, she walked over and asked me what we were doing, and I said we're trying to decide where we're going to go, and she introduced herself as Maya, and said, well, would you like me to be your tour guide for Amsterdam? I'd be willing to take you, you know, to all the tourist places in Amsterdam. And I immediately jumped on that opportunity. And during the 3 days, I would meet her in the lobby in the morning, and we would spend the rest of the day going from one place to another, and sometimes with group tours to different places. And I became extremely infatuated by her. She was very friendly, spoke fluent English, and on the third day, she wanted me to go back to the zoo because she wanted to introduce me to her friend, Lyra. And we did that. And at the end of the day, this is the third day, she wanted me to take back to her room, which I did. She knew Amsterdam so well that I thought that she lived there. And when I dropped her off at her door, I asked if we could correspond. And she said, no, that's not possible. And I asked her why. And she says, I don't live here. I said, where do you live? And she said, I live in the mountains. And I said, in the mountains? What mountains? And she said, the Andes Mountains. I was totally puzzled by this because the Andes Mountains are in South America. So what was somebody that lived in the mountains doing in Amsterdam, giving 3 days of her time as a tour guide to an American who was there for only 3 days? This was weird.
Was she Spanish?
No, she looked, you know, Caucasian. So I wanted to get a picture of her, and I asked her if I could take a picture, and she said no. And I thought that's strange. Then I had somebody else in my group take a picture of me standing in a doorway, and I knew she was off to the side somewhere, but I didn't know exactly where. And he took a picture, and lo and behold, the picture has her in the picture frame. So I actually did get a picture of her, and that's the one I shared with you. And it wasn't until 1994 when I was at the Ozark UFO convention in Arkansas that I met Dr. Carla Turner, and she said a book of mine is just come out called Masquerade of Angels, and it's about the story of Ted Rice. And I got to meet Ted Rice, who was there at that convention as well. And I got pictures of both of them. And I got her book and I read it, and I was shocked by the story of Ted Rice during the summer of 1962. Remember, I went to France in 1963. In 1962, he got a job at the Sun Valley Ski Resort in Idaho, something he had wanted to do. It's a very high-class resort for the wealthy, and he would be working in their one of their restaurants. And on the first day he was working there, this young girl comes up to him and befriends him, and he was very much enamored by her. And they kept on meeting every day during the whole summer that he was there. Would go out on his breaks. They would go out on walks, and it got to the point where they were holding hands, and she even let him kiss her. And Maya wanted to let me hold her hand during my giving me a tour in Amsterdam, and she even let me kiss her. So there were these similarities. And at the end of his a period of work period there at Sun Valley, on the last day that Maya and Lyra, who was also Maya's friend, wanted him to go with him up into the mountains that surrounded the ski resort. And they went into a canyon and went into a hidden place, and lo and behold, there was this spacecraft parked there, hiding there. They got in it and flew to their underground base in the Andes Mountains, because when Ted had been asking, "Where do you come from?" and all she would tell him is, "From the mountains." "What mountains?" And she wouldn't tell him. But then they flew to the Andes Mountains, and they showed him their underground base and how they clone humans and can transfer their consciousness from one clone to another, thus having it, almost, perpetual life. When one body wears out, they replace it with another. And he was shocked by this. And they said, "Well, we can prove it to you by transferring your consciousness to one of these clones." And they did. And when he became conscious in that clone, he was shocked to find out it was a female. And he didn't like the idea. So I asked him to put his consciousness back into his original body, and then they flew him back to the ski resort. And they blocked his memory, and Dr. Carla Turner and her friend, who was a hypnotist, regressed him, and that's how they were able to uncover this hidden part of his story about who Maya and Lyra really are. And that's all recorded in Turner's book, Masquerade of Angels. And when I read that, I said, "Oh my God, it can't be. I mean, did I actually meet these same two women? What's the probability of me meeting two strange women of the same height?" That he described them very clearly about how Maya had these curly brown hair, and sure, the woman Maya I met had this curly brown hair, and she was only about 5 feet tall. You can see that in the photograph by comparing her to my height. The top of her head only came up to my shoulder, and and she looks completely human. I mean, she's very pretty, and to me, she was very attractive. So
it's like the Japanese hybrid. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So let's go over that. So you're meeting these extraterrestrials, and they're walking among us. So let's go back there. Can you go back there, kind of just in your imagination, and go over the conversations you've had now that you have that new information? And is there anything else that you remember that?
I remember. I mean, we talked about everything, and she was constantly asking me questions. Maya was constantly asking Ted Rice questions, and whenever Ted Rice wanted to know something about her, she would be very elusive and non-committal, and he thought this rather strange. Maya, on one type, we were in one of these. I don't know. I think it was the reptile house at one of the zoos, and we were sitting on one of the benches and looking at the glass cages. And we started talking about space. Have you ever wondered what space is like? Going out into space. And I said, no, I haven't really paid much attention to it. I'm curious, and would you ever want to go out into space? And she was quizzing me like she did, and you can read what Ted Rice says that he asked him, and it's basically the same thing. So we were being interviewed by these ETs.
Was there any emotional extraction going on, Dr. Bruce? Like, did they try to ask you how you felt about different things? They don't have emotions a lot of times, so they have to learn that from real human beings. And the hybrid that I was with, that's exactly what she did. She'd ask me all kinds of emotional questions. How would I do if this person said this, or this person said that, or if my mom and dad got into an argument, how would I feel? Did they do that to you when they talked to you?
I would say yes. Maya would, interrogate me in a very friendly way. And if you read what she asked Ted recounted it very clearly, and it's similar type of thing. They were trying to understand more about us, how we operate, how we think.
Right. Yeah, there's another story. Jana, is there something? I'm not crowding you out, am I?
No. Keep going. You're doing great.
Okay. What I was going to see if you had another question, but I wanted to take you to another story that you sent a picture, and I got it today, of the back of a short gal with long hair, and I think that was in Florida. I'm not sure. You said the one that you had the A-port from, the owl.
Yes. What?
Yeah,
oh, yes.
Yeah. Could you tell that? Tell that story.
Yes. Well, Don Ecker invited me to go to this press conference back in February of 1995 in Disney World with the opening of the Tomorrowland, the Future Land, and I was there with a lot of very well-known people at the time in the UFO abduction field, and I'm going to tell two stories. Okay, they're very interesting.
Okay.
This one story that I told you about about the owl trinket. I met this short girl, again, another short girl, pretty, and she was asking me a bunch of questions. She got me off by myself, and we talked, and she said she comes from a very wealthy family, and she's involved with, the intelligence community and things like this. And this was my first exposure to all of this, trying to figure out what in the world is going on here. And she didn't want me to write down any of this information in this pocket notebook I had. She knew I had a pocket notebook, and I knew I had taken it out. I wanted to write some information down. I was going to ask her for her address, and she said, I can't give it to you. And she said, don't write anything down. I don't want you to write anything down. So after our conversation, I pulled out my notebook and I wrote her name down and some of the things that we had talked about. And I didn't think about it after that. Then after the conference, after I was home, I had put that notebook onto a table in the computer room and just left it there. And the next morning, I went to get it because I wanted to read something that I had written down into it, and it was missing. And instead, a little trinket owl was in its place. Now, I'd never seen this owl before, okay? This was very bizarre. And the fact that it was an owl was very significant. I already recognized that as being significant. And, of course,
Great.
You do realize that in the American dollar bill, you have an image of an owl, and that's all connected to the so-called, the Illuminati and the secret societies. And so I was really upset that that they had come in the middle of the night, taken my notebook, but they left behind this trinket, and I took a picture of it and I shared it with both of you, and it's quite significant.
Yes.
I mean, so the implication is that they're watching me, and just to what extent are they watching me? And they can break into my house and steal things if they wanted to.
Did she touch you? Did she touch you anywhere on your arm or your shoulder or anything?
Not that I recall.
Because
no.
they can plant energy on you and trace you, and that's how they do it a lot of times. It's just energy. That's what was in my car one time. Never could find it. So they can just touch you with energy.
Right. It's possible she touched me at one point. It's quite possible, and I just didn't realize what was going on. But
it's interesting. They're all short people. It's short women. I'm short. I'm only 5'2". So
and
these are all short people.
Yeah. There
could be a reason for that. I'm sorry, Dr. Woods. There could be a reason. And the Japanese gal, I think she was 5'2", and I think there could be a reason if they're shape-shifting, if they're grays or a smaller alien being, and if they're shape-shifting into a human, then that would probably be the size that they would be.
Well, it would be their preferred size. If they have clones, they clone humans, they would clone them for that size because they are familiar with that size, they are comfortable with that size, right?
Right.
So that is not the problem. The second story that I wanted to share with you and our audience is that when I arrived at the Orlando airport for this press conference, I was directed to an area where we'd be picked up by a limousine or a van and taken to the Disney World resorts where we'd be assigned rooms. And I noticed that there was this pretty young woman, a short woman again, with sort of curly hair. In fact, if you look at that picture of that other woman with a ponytail to the right is Deborah Steinke, the other woman that I'm talking about. This is amazing that they're both in the same photograph. When we got in the van to go to the Disney World Resort, I was sitting in the front passenger seat, and Deborah was sitting in the next seat behind me, next to on the left side of the van. And I kept on getting this feeling that she was looking at me. She was just couldn't get her eyes off me. Then when we arrived at Disney World and went to the area where we receive our packets of information, we're all standing in line in these different lines, which were all alphabetized, so you could pick up your passes and information. And she was directly behind me and staring at me. And I felt her stare at the back of my head and neck. I mean, it was so obvious that I just turned around and looked straight at her, and I said, "May I help you?" And she laughed. She excused herself and says, I'm trying to figure out who you are, where I've seen you before. And I would expect that would be the line that a guy would give to a girl to pick up a girl,
right.
But not what a girl would tell a guy, right?
Yeah.
So after we got our packets, I suggested that we go get a bite to eat, and we talk and see what was happening. She told me how she was an abductee, an experiencer, and she was invited to that press conference so she could tell her story to the press corps, which was amazing. And during that period of time that we were exchanging our stories, she said that she, aboard a ship, had been shown the head of this man, and she'd been told to memorize it. And as it turned out, it was my head that she was shown, a holographic image of my head.
So you've been abducted. You've been abducted, I guess.
Yeah, and then
you're part of this program. You're part of a bigger program, yes.
Right. Then I remembered, it suddenly hit me because I was sitting on the edge of my bed. This was before the trip to Florida. and I suddenly I had this vision coming in through my optic implant that I have, and so I was seeing a movie, through my eyes. I wasn't seeing the room that I was sitting in, and it was this vision of a curtain around a round table, and the curtain opened, and there was this bust of a woman on that table, that round table. And I was telepathically told to study the face of the woman. Okay? So, and I realized that when I was looking at Deborah, that it was her face that I was looking at. And I said, we both recognized that we were shown images of each other so that we would, be there talking to each other and asking questions, right? So we spent a lot of time, hanging out together during the different trips around Disney World. And at the end of our tour, we were headed back to our hotel, and she was on a different floor than I was. Or no, she was on the same floor, second floor. She was on the other side of the hotel on a balcony than I was. And when we were getting to her room first, and I said, Deborah, I really have enjoyed meeting you, and we've had a great time talking. Says, but I don't want this to go any further. And she smiled and she said, I don't want this to go any further either. And we both were married, okay? And so we shook hands, and she went into her room, and I was walking around the balcony to my room on the other side of the building. And as I turned the corner, a telepathic voice said, congratulations, you passed the test.
Huh.
Wow.
What kind of test do you think
my
that
God.
means?
Yeah, and she had given me her phone number, and and later after I got home, I called her, I said, Deb, told her what happened, and she said, that's strange, because when I went into my room, a telepathic voice told me, congratulations, you passed the test. We didn't cheat on our spouses. That was the test.
Right.
Could they get us to cheat on our spouses?
Right. The one picture that I saw, Dr. Bruce, was the short gal with long hair walking, and you got a picture of her back, and then there was a really tall guy next to her, a big guy. I kind of mentioned to you that maybe she was some kind of a hybrid, and this guy that was with her was security, because they travel in threes. They have a sponsor, they have a security person, and then they have the hybrid in which they're training.
Very possible, but he was part of our group. He was one of the experiencers. He was on the panel, press panel. Okay, I have more pictures of him. So this is all integrated. I just wanted to ask that question. Yeah, this is all integrated. So no question about that. But it's now we can look back in hindsight and see all of this, and it's quite clear that everything that was happening there was being monitored by the intelligence community. No question about that. And I by that intelligence community, I mean in the broadest possible sense of humans and non-humans in human bodies wanting to monitor what was going on.
Okay, yeah, that's what I've been used to during my exploits, I believe that you can say. And you were talking about cloning each other, so they keep living on and on. I was cloned out at the Trinity site when I drove by it in New Mexico. Something hit my window. It was really blunt and loud, and then I felt a chill inside the car. The back of my hair on the back of my neck raised up, and I felt energy in there. And then about 5 minutes later, there was another bump that went back out the window, and I stopped the car. I was so afraid what's going on. So when I got to San Antonio, driving that direction, I met a gal there. She was a receptionist, and she took my order for the room and everything. And I hurt my leg being drugged by my own car. That's another story. But I hurt my leg, so I went to bed early, took a lot of ibuprofen, and it was about 10:30. And the next morning, she had a really mean look on her face, and she said, I saw you last night at Walmart. I said, listen, I was not at Walmart last night. I was in bed in the room at 10:30. My leg was killing me. And she goes, no, same clothes, same everything. That was you. So I said, no, lady, I don't argue with you. I thought about getting hold of the manager, so I just left and just left it alone. But when I got home to get my car fixed from the hail damage, there was a guy that was there, and I was sitting on the bench waiting to get my estimate on my car. There was a guy that walked by me, and he said, you've been here for 2 hours or so. And I said, no, sir, I just sat down just 2 or 3 minutes ago. He said, no. He said, I saw you sitting there 2 hours or more. And I said, no, sir, I'm not calling you a liar. I just got here, okay? And he says, listen, he says, I don't like people lying to me. He said, it was you. And he said, I know it was you. And he just told me, shut up, and he walked away. So apparently, I think whatever happened, they made some kind of what would you call those holographs? They make a holograph of you, and it's you. It smells like you. It talks like you, just like you were saying about the cloning. And this thing was ahead of me by 2 or 3 hours in time. So it was some kind of a time trip too. I don't know. So is that what you were talking about earlier, Dr. Bruce, about the cloning?
Well, this is what Ted Bryce talks about in Carla Turner's book about them cloning in their underground base in the Andes Mountains. And the problem, we have everybody looking at those ruins of ancient cultures in the mountains in Peru, and yet not realizing that the ETs are still living there. They're still there. They're just underground. But at any rate, as far as cloning, I think you're getting into another category, another area of our existence, and that is, out-of-body experiences. And I think Janet can tell us some more about this, of how you can be out of body and appear to somebody else in another location, and they will think you are there. You will look exactly like you would, and but your physical body is wherever you left it. And I've had that experience of being in a different place.
Is this a sleep time that you're talking about, that this happens, or is it daytime where you're out and about?
Well, this is weird because I know it's controlled and monitored. How do I know? I came home. I was living in Houston, Texas. I came home to my house after work. I felt unusually tired. I mean, this was strange. It was just suddenly came over me, washed over me that I was go to lie down. I felt like lying down. I was so tired. So I went into my bedroom and I flopped down face first into the pillow. The next thing I knew, I was walking down a hall in a hospital. Okay, and I had on scrubs, doctor scrubs. I still had my beard on. I had a full beard at the time. I knew where I was going. I walked down this hall. I turned into a room. I walked up to a gurney. There was this woman lying in the gurney, and she looked at me with these very troubled, pain-filled eyes and said, "Oh, thank you, doctor, for coming." And she said, "I am in so much pain, they won't give me any pain medication." And I took my right hand and I put it on her head, and the pain went away. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much." And she then closed her eyes and fell asleep. I turned around, walked out of the room, walked back down the hall, and bang, I found myself lying in bed, and I was waking up. I said, "What the hell was that all about?" And I didn't think anything more of it until this was on the early, like October the 10th to the 12th of 1983. And then I met this woman on December 15th, 1983, at my dentist's office under very unusual conditions. And she saw me, and she recognized me. She said, "Come here, I want to talk to you." So I did. And we immediately, engaged, created a friendship right there. She gave me her phone number and said, "I want you to call me." And during that phone call, I discovered all sorts of things that our paths had crossed. And she told me about, I said, how did you recognize me? She said, you were the doctor that came into my hospital room and took my pain away. The next morning, I woke up and I asked the nurse who that doctor was, and the nurse said, well, please describe him. And the nurse said, well, we don't have a doctor here with a full beard. And when she saw me, she recognized me as the person who had come into her room at that time. So I was in two places at the same time. So how
you were
do you explain
directing, Dr. Bruce, you was directing this question towards Janet. Maybe Janet can explain the out of body and the. Is there an ET connection to out of body also, Janet?
If there can be, but I think that's our natural ability. Humans have the natural ability to bilocate and do like what you did, Dr. Bruce. So I go to these different meetings on different worlds, and I'm still here. My husband can come in, and my body's still here, but I'm fully functioning. I have a body. Is it a clone? Well, the super soldiers say that part of what they do is they make clones for them on the different planets, because traveling in space is very deleterious to bodies, right? That's why currently the gray body is adapted to space travel, but the human bodies, they get a lot of wear and tear, and they don't last as long. So they sometimes put your clone on a different planet, and they just transfer your soul, so to speak, to the different clones, and that's just how we travel. So I don't know exactly because I don't have a 100% explanation. I don't have everybody standing around giving me explanations about what's happening. I just have to piece it together, right? So,
right, yeah.
But I am wherever I am. So my identification of me as a self, as a separate person, is wherever I am. And I think that's what happens when we die. I think we're always going to be somewhere. And that we are so advanced on some soul level, and I'm getting a lot of feedback, I hope it's not coming through, but we're so advanced as souls. I had Marilyn Hughes on, she was explaining this. She's had thousands of travels out of body, and so she's been to the dead zone and God zone and everything imaginable in between. And she was piecing together some missing information that I needed. And so we can simultaneously exist in many forms, many incarnations. Because time is an illusion of this third dimensional physicality realm. So we can be on other planets, other worlds, other dimensions, vibratory frequencies simultaneously. The older the soul is, the more advanced you are in movability. So it sounds like, Dr. Bruce, you're a very old soul, and sometimes you just need it. And I've had that same thing. You just feel so tired. All you can do is get in the door and go on the bed, and the next thing you know, you're somewhere else. One time I bilocated, and I was in the future of Maui, it was somewhere in the future of the road that I'm living on, and I was standing at the base of this giant 7-foot tower, and it worked on the thermals. So there were little panels that would move with the thermals, and it was 7 or 8 miles high. By the time it got down to the Earth, closer to the Earth, it generated enough power, and so the message was, this one powers this half of the Earth, there's another one on the other side of the Earth, and that's all we need to power the entire Earth. And, and then Hoagland had shown a video of the moon base, and they had these giant 7-foot towers. So there I was, and then the next thing I know, back to my bed, and it's like, whoa. So I say we're time travelers, we teleport. We're limiting ourselves. We think that we have to have some kind of machine pick us up and take us through the walls, or, that happens. I've been picked up by graves. I've been taken through walls. I've been put into ships. I've been, taken to underground facilities. I haven't gone through the Earth that I'm aware of, but I don't know if I would. If I'm inside of a ship and that's what a ship can do, go through the Earth, I probably wouldn't know. I mean, I went through walls. Why not? If we could somehow move molecules aside, we can go into an underground facility. Oh, I wanted to say about the underground facility. There's a ship at the underneath the right paw of the Sphinx, which they talk about in many historical books, and Nagashita Post describes he's got a ship there. And there's a ship underneath Montauk, miles down. There's people that have reported in Montauk when they go down there, and there's a ship way underneath the ground. How does it get there? Probably like you're talking about. And anyway, that's all I wanted to add. So back to you, Dave, and you can either add
right.
or
The reason why I was going to ask this question is because both of you mentioned, Janet and Dr. Bruce, you both mentioned being extremely tired before something happened like that. Well, on about 2 or 3 of my, I guess, abductions, I was really tired, and I had to lay down, and then that's when things happened to me. It seems like some magnetic energy, they come in, and they're invisible. They come in, the ETs are invisible. They put this magnetic energy on you, and I know how it feels, but they have different doses, just like they would in a hospital with an anesthetic. They have different doses. Some are just to dumb you down, let you take in everything, hear everything, see everything, but you don't talk, and you don't take any action. The other part of it is they make you really tired, where you want to lay down. Then that's when they can, I guess, in a way, have their way with you and do the biological experiments or whatever, DNA or whatever they're taking away from you, semen or eggs. And it seems like that what you two were saying coordinates with what I feel when I was abducted, and a couple of times I felt dumbed down. I felt really tired. Does that make any sense to either one of you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I had another similar experience right after my late wife died in 1991. And this was a bizarre experience. After work, I came home, and once again, I was extremely tired. And I went in to the spare bedroom and just flopped down onto the bed, face into the pillow. The next thing I found myself is leaving my body and traveling up through the roof of the condo, up through the sky, up into the stratosphere and into outer space. And I was looking at the Earth as it was getting smaller and smaller down below me. And I didn't know where I was going or why I was traveling upwards. And suddenly I noticed I was following this cord, this sort of a silver cord. And at the end of this cord, I reached this huge sphere, this very beautiful pinkish sphere, membrane-like. And it had a bluish nucleus in the center. And I was looking at it from the outside, and I saw the cord go into the inner nucleus and coil up like a serpent in that nucleus. And around that nucleus was all of this cotton-like material, and in that cotton-like material were these beautiful crystals, of many, many crystals. And I knew, telepathically or psychically, that every one of them had the memory embedded in it of a past life. So I was looking at my recording center, my hard drive, if you will, of my soul. And then I looked around and I saw thousands and thousands of these other spheres at the same height above the Earth, each with a cord going down to a person down on Earth. Then when I had finished studying my sphere, I followed my cord all the way back down through the roof into the top of my skull, and I woke up. And that's what I remembered very clearly. It was all very conscious.
A very lucid memory that you were pulling out there. There's a difference between, I guess, normal routine dreams and a very lucid, a dream that you regress and then you go back and your memory pours it out, and you remember every detail, just like you were saying. You remembered every detail of that dream, and that's not a typical routine dream. You can't remember a routine dream. After you get up about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, and in about a half an hour you forget everything about that dream. But the dreams that you remember are the lucid ones that like you just said, you remember every detail, and you don't have to write it down. You memorize it.
Right.
Right. It's the memory. So what do you think I think they're training us. I think they're educating us so we can do something. And I don't ever feel like a victim. I'm excited. I'm ecstatic when I have these experiences. It's like I'm walking on a cloud, and I come back and I'm highly charged. Sometimes I was about to go to the doctor this morning because of my finger, and I made an appointment. I woke up and my finger's fine. I thought I had a blood clot. I thought I'm going to end up in the hospital. My sisters tell me how people in my family die from blood clots. You go down that whole thing like, oh, my God, this is crazy. And then I wake up and it's gone. I go, okay, they were working on me last night. I don't have to go to the doctor, so I canceled the doctor. And here I am doing the show instead of sitting in the damn hospital they have no internet at my hospital. It's horrible. It's like a nightmare. So anyway, but I think they're training us. There's something coming down. I get that 2020 is going to be an amazing year, but I don't know. Do you guys have any kind of hit psychic hits on what's going to go on?
Yes, I think what the military is, they're disclosing a lot of, UFOs. And somebody asked, who was the guy who was the defense minister in Canada? He made a comment.
Hellier.
He was mentioning that why all of a sudden now the U.S. is coming out with a lot of this disclosure with the Navy pilots, and they're a little bit concerned now about the dangers of these things flying all around our aircraft, and now all of a sudden they're concerned. I think things are moving fast, Janet, like you were saying.
Right.
How do you feel,
Bruce?
Dr. Bruce?
What do you think's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, this is part of a plan, but if you notice, it's going in cycles. It gets more and more intense, and then it calms down for a while, for 5 or more years, and then it gets really intense again. It's sort of following the sunspot cycle. We're right now at a sunspot low, one of the lowest that we've had in a long time, recorded time. And it's usually during those low periods of sunspots that your UAP or UFO activity increases. That's just a general thumbnail observation. And so things are coordinating in the sense that we're getting more and more disclosures. But don't be surprised if in another 5 or 10 years, things tend to quiet down again.
Yeah, it seems like they do go in cycles. In the 1950s, they had a lot of sightings, and then in the 60s, it slowed down a little bit. But that's when I had my first sighting is in 1963. But yeah, there is an up and down motion in that, and they say they travel across the U.S. in a particular, pattern. And Illinois is one part of the pattern, and you go out west, and you can almost follow Route 66 to where most of the sightings occur, like through Texas, through New Mexico, Arizona, and those places. And you will see that there's a lot of sightings in those areas. If you take these pins and put them up across the state, you'll see that it's almost a parallel line. It's what is it, 43 or something like that latitude?
43 degrees north latitude?
Yeah, maybe Dr. Bruce can explain that. You have the scientific stuff on your side.
Well, the Pine Bush area is at 41 degrees, 36 minutes latitude, 41.
Okay.
And that's very close to being the latitude for the Devil's Tower.
Right.
Oh. Well, I saw one of those pin maps, and you couldn't see Maui yet for the pins. I mean, it was just so full of pins of sightings. So apparently there's a hotbed. But I grew up in a hotbed, too, Pittsburgh. Lots of sightings there. Lots of sightings.
Right. They talk about a lot of states that don't have sightings, but Illinois is where I saw all my 5 up close sightings, and I never saw any sightings out at in Sedona, but I did run across some dimensional things that happened to me, and also the hybrid. I saw some high flying orbs, but I never saw anything close enough to where I can identify it as some sort of a craft or the design of this craft. So yeah, that's weird. I travel out west, don't see anything. Stay here in Illinois, I see all kinds of up close UFOs.
Well, I think it may be because you're selected by extraterrestrials, so to speak, and wherever you go, there they are. Because I had all these sightings in Pittsburgh, and then I moved to State College, and there were all this interaction, and then I moved to Oahu, and I had tons of interaction, and here in Maui, I had tons of interaction. So it might be you that they're interested.
Right. Yeah. Well, they've got me. I've had a couple of implants, so they're following me, just like they do you and they do Dr. Bruce. He's got implants. He's got that the implant in the eye, the eye optical nerve, and they're probably following you, Dr. Bruce, from that.
Right. Yeah, that is one thing. I mean, there are more implants that I've had. Back on Thanksgiving 1993, my wife, then Pat, and I were visiting her mother in Massanutten Village in Virginia, right on the edge of the Massanutten Ski Resort in the Blue Ridge Mountain Range. And we had heard a lot about strange things that had happened there at that ski resort. Pat's brother had disappeared in the middle of winter. He wanted to go hiking in the mountains, and they found all of his hiking stuff in his jacket on the living room floor and couldn't find him. They went outside and saw his tracks in the snow suddenly disappearing, and they couldn't find him for several days. And suddenly, one of the security guards found him in the machine room at the top of the ski lift, and he was all hypothermic, and his clothes were tattered, and he was delusional. And they took him to the military hospital because his father was in the Air Force, and they gave him a tranquilizer to which he was allergic, and he died. And so Pat and I wanted to go. We'll go up to the top of this overlook to the ski resort and just see what was going on. When we drove up there, the switchback road up to the top of this overlook, we parked, and a craft came in and sat right down next to me on the driver's side of our van, and another one hovered over us, and we were both abducted. And we ended up with 30 minutes of missing time. So that was quite unusual as well. But during that time, they put implants in my auditory, right next to my auditory canal. And when I woke up or came back, I had a bruise on the back of my neck where they had knocked me out, and 2 holes below my ears where ear canals, and that were oozing blood serum. And I got an X-ray of my skull, and sure enough, there's a hole in my skull at that point. So you can actually see where they inserted some sort of an implant.
Right. Yeah. They go through the ear. Clumsy?
Yeah, I've heard. There was a woman who was describing how they would take a bunch of children, and one time they had an oops, and they killed one of the kids. They returned this little boy, and the little boy died. So sometimes they don't know what they're doing, or it might be new trainees, and they're doing these experiments, and they're putting in an implant, and if you think about it, if you put an implant in the nose, I have one in my sinuses, and if they slip, they could kill you, that's so close to the brain. So apparently, I don't think they intended to kill this little boy that died.
But you also, humans can kill you too when they give you a medication to which you are allergic to calm you down after an abduction. Now that's pretty wild too, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Dr.
yeah,
Bruce,
yeah.
how long was this? How long was this young guy gone? Was there any missing time with this young guy that went to the Air Force Base and he died from an injection? How long was he gone?
He was gone for 2 or 3 days.
Oh, okay.
It was like a Travis Walton abduction back in. This would have been when was this? Oh, back in the late 70s.
So you think it was intentional?
That he was killed? No,
Yeah.
It was an accident. It was an accident.
Oh, okay.
Because he had all of these complained of these abductions before, and they his parents had sent him to a psychiatrist, a military psychiatrist, who, of course, diagnosed him as paranoid schizophrenic, because they didn't know anything about
I don't know what to
abduction.
do with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like back in
shame.
the 60s. Nobody knew what to do with an implant that I held out in my hand that I dug out of my body. I showed it to my mom, and she said, throw it away. And in 1963, I had a guy ask me, he said, why didn't you research it? Why didn't you take that implant to a scientist or a biologist? I said, back then, we didn't know anything about implants, UFOs, or anything except for the one I saw, and I knew that was real. And my mom saw him too. And this one particular gentleman, I don't want to say his name on the recording or on the air, but he was trying to, I guess, catch me going back and forth to my mom and myself that she believed in UFOs, but then she got mad when I come in one night late with that first UFO, and she said, well, I'll UFO your butt. And then this one particular guy who was interviewing me, he said, I thought you said your mom didn't believe in UFOs. Well, that's not what I said. I said she was going to kick my UFO butt. She saw a UFO in the 50s, and on the radio, she said that a lot of times on the radio stations, they would say, if you saw a flying saucer, do not approach it. Run away from it. And she said all the kids were scared at that point back in the 50s and the late 40s, I guess after the Roswell incident. So there was some hysteria back in those days, and they knew about them, but they never thought much about the researching of it, except for the government. They did, and I believe they still know. They know a lot more than we do. But yeah, it's something that you can go back and research so many times. Like Roswell is kind of like an old story to me, and I like to keep up with what's going on today, and try to put the pieces of the puzzle together from other people like yourself, Dr. Bruce, and like you, Janet. Get this information where I can make sense out of what happened to me, and that we can all share this in the experiencer field and get to know each other in a way that we don't doubt, or we don't get into a circular firing squad like they talked politically about here lately, that we don't start, doing that against each other and open our minds and believe every story that comes to us, because there's always some truth, even to somebody who's making up something. So that's what my feelings are, is let's research these things. The talking heads have all the information. They have all the history. I don't want to deal too much in the history. I want to deal with what's going on now, like with the Navy and like with myself, with the experiences I've had, and sharing experiences with the two of you. And I find that more gratifying, and I learn more. It's just like when you were talking about being tired, and you too, Janet, when you said something about being tired.
Mm-hmm.
I had that feeling, and I thought to myself, bingo, there's another piece of the puzzle. You see how that goes?
Right. This is why we're sharing. I love the fact that we're sharing this information, because we each have perceptions and parts of the puzzle that help each other.
Right.
And that's what I like about doing this. I bring on different experiencers all the time, and I don't get bogged down with, are they lying or telling the truth? I just get the story. And if they're making it up, where are they making it up from? They're getting it somewhere. That's what my husband says in psychology. We don't care you're making it up, where you're making it up from, because you're accessing information that's relevant to you. And there's information even in the lies that people select to tell, right? So there's a bigger story within the smaller story, and we're getting the different pieces. I just want to get from Dr. Bruce. You mentioned Dr. Turner's that you said Dr. Turner's book. What was that book called with Dr. Carla Turner that you mentioned? I'm trying to find it.
Masquerade of Angel.
It must be.
Do it, Google. You'll find
anymore.
a PDF for it. A free PDF.
Okay.
Download and just Masquerade of Angel with Turner, and you should be able to find it.
Well, Dr. Bruce, wasn't it Dr. Turner that actually she come out and start writing books that she mysteriously died?
Yes. The year after I met her, she died of liver cancer.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like they were taking out the early people.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Ellen Crystal, when I talked about it with the silent invasion in my story, she died of pancreatic cancer in 2002. So, and then Stephen Greer was attacked with cancer as well. He was able to overcome that.
Right.
And but at any rate.
Yeah, when Greer was starting it, there were 5 of them that got injected at the Prophets Conference. I think it was at the Prophets Conference. And within a year, 2 of them had died, but Greer was able to somehow move past it and not die. But, yeah, that's a story. So, but they don't seem to be doing that much anymore, killing us off for some reason. And that's something to look at.
Well, there's also this frequency that they've been shooting at the embassy in Cuba and the embassy in China, where these people would get sick and they'd lose their hearing from the I guess the frequencies or vibrations. Maybe Dr. Bruce might be able to elaborate on that. But they're using frequencies as a weapon to hurt us, disable us, or mess with our brains, or maybe even give us cancer. Dr. Bruce, can you elaborate on that?
All I suspect is that we have warring factions of non-humans that are, trying to change the outcome of whatever is going on. Good and evil is, the Christians have tried to label all of this UFO stuff as demonic. And but that would be like labeling all humans as demonic because of all the bad acts of a few. So I would have to keep an open mind by that.
Do you think that we're targets from opening up what we know about what we know?
I think so, but we're also being protected as well. We have guardians.
I know I'm protected. I should have been dead 100 times over, and so they want me here. My mother was tried to kill me. She couldn't kill me. And not to say that I can't be killed, so don't try to kill me. But I feel there's something protecting me, like you said.
Right.
I know we're being allowed to say this stuff. I don't think they're going to come tomorrow and give us all cancer. We're going to die horribly. We are part of disclosure. That's what I'm trying to say. We're part of disclosure. We're being allowed to say things that we couldn't say 20 years ago. And we're saying it.
Yes. I agree.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
I couldn't say some of these things 20 years ago because my voice wouldn't let me, right? I was self-censoring. And so now it's coming out. I'm saying it. I'm saying things. Like yesterday I was interviewed by Cameron Brower, and I just said all this stuff, It was like, whoa, it's just coming out now. So I think we're okay. I think we're safe. And that's what I mean by 2020. And this year is starting, but by 2020, there's something really amazing going to happen. I could be wrong, but I'm getting excited.
Yeah,
I'm really excited.
I get spiritual elation every time I have some kind of event that happens. I haven't had any big events happen the last 2 or 3 years, and I kind of miss it. I wish I could find out more about why me. I know a lot of experiencers ask that question, why me? And a lot of times we can fill it in by saying, well, maybe you have RH factor blood, maybe you were an Indian, American Indian, Native Indian. A lot of times they track them, and I've got American Native Indian in me, about 15% Crow. So I don't know if they follow the bloodlines, and so the why me question is really a big one that we don't know about.
Yes, I agree. What else? I noticed on Ancient Aliens they got into the colors of eyes with this RH factor, and said that an unusually large number of experiencers, abductees, have green or hazel green eyes.
Right.
About 30 to 40%, and whereas with the normal populations it's less than 10%. And I was born with brown eyes, and you can look at my driver's license, and it'll say brown eyes. But back when I started having all of these experiences in the early 90s, my eyes started to change to green, and now they're almost pure green.
Really?
Wow.
Mine changed from a brown to a hazel color, but not to green. That's fantastic. Wow.
Well, they're hazel on the outside, okay, and green on the center. So they're getting more and more green, okay. They went through a hazel phase and then into a green.
Okay. Yeah, I had some bright
flashes.
My eyes
are blue. My eyes are blue.
That's interesting.
And so, well, I think it's only 1% of the population of the Earth are the blue and hazel eyes. I looked that figure up. So that means, that was in your DNA for you to have that emerge, right? So do you know what color eyes your parents had? What color eyes
brown.
did your parents have?
Both of them had brown eyes.
They both had brown eyes? So it could have been recessive. What about you?
You talking to me, Janet?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. What about you?
I was born with brown eyes, and now they're lighter color. I had people notice that about 6-7 years ago. I was hit by a real bright flash of light across my windshield in Nevada, heading towards Alamo, Nevada, and it was so bright that I had sunglasses on, and I turned my head to the left to try to get away from it, but it hit my right eye quite a bit, and the eye doctor actually noticed it about a month after that happened, and she kept looking into my right eye, in which she said my retina was burned, and she said, have you been exposed to a bright light? I said, yes, I have been exposed to a bright light, but I think it was alien, and I kind of joked. I was joking with her. That's what I felt it was, but I was joking with her. I kind of laughed because you don't want to be serious with a doctor, but she wrote it down. She said patient said he saw a UFO and had a bright light, and it burned his eyes. Well, she didn't have no idea what it was. I mean, she couldn't put a diagnosis to it, but every time she put a light on it, it hurt. And I told her, I said, what are you doing? She said, you're really red back there. And also, Dr. Bruce, there could have been an implant put in me there, in which made it all red and sore.
Right.
Was
a lot of possibilities.
Was yours red and sore? Okay. Did you notice any pain?
Mm-hmm.
With my eyes? No.
Right, yeah.
But that during the Massanutten abduction, when my wife and I were sitting in our van, waiting for the last person in the parking lot at the top of the mountain to leave, and then we were about ready to start our sky watching that night. I had my camera set up on a tripod in front of the van. Suddenly these lights come in the entrance to the parking lot again. I said, oh no, here we got another visitor. But this object was off the ground, and as it was approaching me, I looked at it, and its headlights were extremely bright, and there was this black dome in between or on top of the headlights, and there were no tires. It was hovering, coming towards us, and suddenly there was this flash, and I felt a sting in my eye, and I was hit by a laser. And I turned my head, and I was telepathically told, "Do not move. Stay where you are. And do not look at the lights." And I could move my eyes enough that I could see this craft come in and park and right next to the van. It was about maybe 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and I saw its headlights illuminating the trees in front of it, and the trunks of the trees got illuminated lower and lower and lower, and finally I hear this noise of the craft moving gravel in the parking lot, and then there was a silence, and the next thing I heard was the driver's door opening, and then bang! I felt something hit the back of my neck, and after this, my wife said, "You have a bruise on the back of your neck," and they knocked me out, and they operated on me right there in the car seat, and put those implants in. And while my wife, they opened another craft was hovering above, and they came around and they pulled her out, floated her out, and put her in that shuttlecraft that landed on my side of the van, and they took her up into the large mothership above us. And afterwards, we were recounting all of this, and she said, "Well, my underwear was turned inside out and ripped. It was brand new underwear." And she said there was a needle track in my right arm. So, but it wasn't over a vein. And so we had all of these strange things. But I got shot with some sort of a beam of light that was very painful when it hit my eye. And
right.
I have these floaters in that eye today. So
yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like identical. Events. It's like the bright light hit our eyes, and it hurt our eyes, and you see, there's another piece of the puzzle we're putting together. I had the same thing. It was a wave of energy that come and hit me, and at that time, I don't know if I was out or not, but I called my brother, and he said, "Well, you're an hour later than what you're supposed to be." He said, "You're supposed to call me an hour ago," and he kept tabs on me because he thought I was going to be taken by the aliens, and because he knew I had contact with these UFOs and things, and he was actually afraid, and he said, "You call me every once in a while, okay?" So I called him, and he said, "Well, you're an hour late." He said, "It's not that." He said, "Even if you take the time zones and you subtract them," he said, "you're still an hour late." I said, "Well, my eyes are hurting, and I've been putting cold water on them." And I said, "I got flashed by something." He said, "You got more than flashed. You were abducted." He said this. I didn't say that. I didn't really know because of the time an hour passed, and my eyes were burning, and I was throwing cold water on them, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to make the Alamo convention there in Nevada, in which Travis Walton. That's where I first met Travis Walton at that small Alamo convention.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I have floaters too. I was finishing up the Stargates and Cosmos conference that I was putting on in Albuquerque in October last year. It was like I was leaving on November 1st, and I'm in the lobby and saying goodbye to a bunch of speakers, and all of a sudden I get these. It's like I had a flash, and then I got these floaters. So I got hit by a beam like right in the lobby there. And I was going, what is going on here? I thought it was like spiders in front of my eyes, and it was weird. And there were a bunch of people there, and nobody else got it. So who knows? I mean,
when I was at Janet, when I was at a Cody conference in 1994, I met this woman who told me about how she met this alien who looked very human, stepping out of a saucer-shaped ship that had landed in her backyard. And they had quite a conversation, and she said she convinced him to go to one of these camera shot places where you can sit in a booth and get a picture, and she got a picture of him, and she showed the picture of this alien to me, and I was amazed. He looked just like anybody, the older man, middle-aged, and then we started talking, and lo and below, she says, I told her about having this flash in my eyes and having these floaters, and she said, and I have floaters in my eyes. So it seems to be another common characteristic.
What kind of clothes did this alien have?
He had on a sort of looked like a suit, because I walked with her into a public area, to a pharmacy where they had a camera booth, and so he looked normal dressed, interestingly enough, with a suit on.
Sometimes they don't know what to wear. They're not dressed according to the crowd, so they might think a suit is what people wear, but a suit wouldn't be appropriate for a conference unless you're one of the presenters, right? Something that they usually don't know what the customs are.
Well, remember, Men in Black all wear suits.
Right. And
that's
they're
true.
old-fashioned.
That's gotten around the universe. Yeah.
They wear older clothes. I saw dimensional people in Sedona who wore 1950s type wardrobe.
Wow.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned that. There was a being that came through an interdimensional portal in my neighbor's backyard. Our two backyards faced each other, so it was almost in my yard, but it was physically in their yard. And he was dressed like a Grim Reaper, but he had mortician clothes from like the 1800s with the top hat and everything. And we were just going, what? What is this? And so, of course, we called it a ghost, but it could have been anything. It was interdimensional. I saw the Stargate open, right? I saw the portal open, and it looks like the water in Stargate. It looks like it's watery. It doesn't have the pillars or the hard casing around it, and it's like they just they kind of climb into our reality.
Janet, Dr. Bruce, we're approaching top of the hour, and I've got to go. So if you two want to continue, then I'm going to bow out.
Well, just final words, and I'll do the exit music.
Okay.
Final words, and then I'll end the show. Go ahead.
Okay.
You lead cue up the music. Go ahead. Do you want to do your final words, Dr. Bruce?
Yeah.
Just that I have a lot more to tell, a lot more to my story, and my book is going to be coming out soon called Unconventional Aerial Phenomena in the Hudson and Wallkill River Valley of New York. And it's about 400 pages long and has hundreds of photographs in it of actual sightings. So this is a major contribution to the Pine Bush phenomenon that has attracted so much attention over the decades, and but also the first time something that is this rich in data for anybody who really wants to see the evidence, because the skeptics always say, well, where are the photographs? Well, now they can buy my book.
There you go. Great.
Wonderful.
That sounds really great. Yeah, that sounds great, Dr.
Send
Bruce.
me the link. Send me the link to that book, and I'll put it on our website for you, so we can get you some details. Go ahead.
Out.
Final words. Thank you, Dave. Final words for you.
Okay, my final words are: I had a good time talking to you two, and like I said, I'm always picking up little pieces of the puzzle. My future is that I'm expanding on trying to put together and make sense all my experiences, and to see if there's a match out there, in which I'm finding out there's little details every once in a while. I am going to put together a book and write it. I have about 260 pages of ledger that I could probably get a book or two out of from all my experiences: dimensional, UFO, hybrid, I guess A-ports, in which I've got some of those too. I guess some of my material, I guess, is going to be Grant Cameron's going to use some of the A-port material. He's really into the A-ports, and that's why you mentioned the owl a while ago, Dr. Bruce. That's an A-port in a way, but you know who delivered that A-port. A lot of A-ports, right, you don't know who delivered them. But I'm going to be on some other radio shows. Grant Cameron, I've done some work with him, and I will probably this weekend. So I'm just trying to exploit other experiencers and to find out how everything is put together. I'm looking for the truth. That's basically my future direction.
Well, thank you. And Bruce and Dave, we will have you back again. We'll talk offline about dates. And I want to thank everybody for coming today. And this has been the Aquarian Radio Network, and our show is the Alien Contact Organization. And I'm Janet Carolissa, signing off, and we're going to play Planet of Peace by Jaia Earthchild as our exit music. Much love and blessings and aloha.
Shed the air since the dawn of time. No one takes a breath saying this one's mine. We share the sun, we share the heat. It's time to learn to share the land indeed. You who govern, choose to spend more on war than we can comprehend. We insist you share our wealth, food and water, homes and health, teachers, trees and medicine. Then the time of true peace can begin. We are all one human family, sharing one. Our home is a planet of peace, planet of peace, planet of peace. You of every nation are family to me. I feel such consternation that you suffer while I walk free. I will do all that I can to help unite this family of woman, child, and man. The leaders of our nation, are they wise as well as strong, or boys in imitation, pointing daddy's gun, threatening the future, endangering us all? The people of all nations are united to end all war, for we are one human